Apache woman had no shelter for her cattle in the rain until a mountain man said, "Come with me." Rain had been falling for days across the high desert plateau, a relentless gray curtain that turned the dusty land into a patchwork of mud and puddles. For most people, the rain might have been welcome, a rare blessing in a region where water often disappeared for months. But for the Apache woman, the heavy weather brought nothing but worry and exhaustion. Her small herd of cattle, the pride of her family for generations, struggled to find safe ground to graze. The little shelters she had built were soaked and sagging under the weight of the rain. Every time she stepped outside, the mud clung to her boots, and the wind whipped at her jacket, chilling her to the bone. Her name was Kaya, and she was used to hard work. From the moment she could walk, she had been learning the ways of her ancestors, caring for animals, tending to the land, and keeping the small family homestead running. But even all her experience and knowledge seemed barely enough against the unyielding storm. She trudged through the muck toward the cattle pens, her hands raw from mending the rickety wooden gates for the third time that morning. Every fence she repaired seemed to wobble a little more with each gust of wind, and every tarp she tied down threatened to tear. The cattle were restless. They stamped their hooves, their heads low, ears flicking anxiously at the pounding rain. Some huddled under the meager shelter of a shed that had long ago been patched together with old boards and nails. Others huddled near the rocks along the edge of the pasture, but there was only so much room, and even the rocks offered little protection from the drenching rain. Kaya moved among them, speaking softly, her voice barely carrying over the roar of the storm. "It's okay. It's okay," she whispered, stroking the neck of a young cow shivering in the corner. The animal nudged her hand, as if sensing her worry and trying to reassure her in return. Despite her best efforts, she could see the toll the weather had already taken. The grass, normally a patchwork of green and gold, was now a soggy, flattened carpet. Mud clung to the cows' hooves, and some of the younger calves were struggling to keep their footing. Kaya's stomach tightened as she counted them. None were missing, but she knew it was only a matter of time before the rain caused injuries or illness. Inside her small cabin, the smell of damp wood and earth mingled with the faint aroma of the coffee she had brewed hours ago. She stood by the window, watching the rain blur the horizon. The mountains in the distance were nearly invisible behind sheets of gray, and the valley below had turned into a river of mud. Her parents had gone to bed early, exhausted from helping her with the morning chores, and she stayed behind, her mind racing. The animals needed constant attention, but her own strength was dwindling. Kaya remembered her grandmother's stories about storms like this, about ancestors who had faced worse yet had survived. They spoke of patience and resilience, of understanding the land rather than trying to fight it. She took a deep breath, letting the stories guide her, giving her courage. But even courage had its limits when every day felt like a struggle against forces she could not control. The wind rattled the windows, making her jump. She pulled on her thick coat and boots and stepped back outside, determined to check on the cattle again. The rain splashed into her face, soaking her hair and stinging her skin, but she pressed forward. Each step was heavy, sinking into the mud, but Kaya moved with purpose. She stopped at a corner of the pen where the smallest calves huddled. Their eyes were wide and frightened. She knelt, brushing mud from their fur and whispering soothing words. Hours passed this way, each moment stretching into the next, as Kaya tended to one problem after another. A fence had broken near the creek, letting a few cows wander too close to the water. She ran, splashing through the mud, hauling them back to safety. A tarp had torn, leaving a calf exposed. She patched it as best she could, her fingers numb and aching from the cold. The sky above showed no signs of stopping, and she knew she couldn't do it all alone. She paused for a moment, leaning against a fence post, breathing heavily. Her chest ached from the physical labor, and the weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. The storm was unrelenting, and yet she had to keep going. She thought about the seasons, about how her ancestors had survived these harsh lands without the conveniences of modern life. They had worked with what they had, understood the land's moods, and relied on each other. Kaya felt a pang of loneliness. No one else was out here now. No one to share the burden, no one to lend a hand. Her thoughts drifted to the coming weeks. If the rain did not stop, she would need more than patience and determination. She would need help, and there was almost none to be found. The nearest neighbors were miles away, over rough terrain that was now nearly impassable with mud and floodwater. She had always been independent, proud of her ability to manage her herd on her own, but this storm made her realize that pride alone could not keep her cattle safe. Even as she moved among the animals, checking their shelters and reinforcing fences, she felt a strange mixture of fear and resolve. Fear for her herd, fear of losing what she had worked so hard to protect, fear of failing those who depended on her, and yet resolve, an inner voice that refused to let her give up, that reminded her she was capable, strong, and resourceful. By late afternoon, the rain showed no sign of stopping. Kaya had barely eaten, her stomach tight from worry and exertion. She trudged back to the cabin to warm herself, slipping off her soaked boots and coat. The cabin felt colder than usual, the dampness seeping into the walls, yet it was still a haven compared to the open pens. She poured herself a small cup of coffee and sat by the stove, letting the warmth seep into her hands. Her eyes wandered to the horizon. The mountains were barely visible now, shrouded in a gray mist. The land that had always seemed so familiar and welcoming now felt vast and indifferent. She realized that her battle was far from over, and that she needed a solution beyond the makeshift repairs and her own strength. The cattle depended on her, and she could not let them down. As night fell, the storm continued. Kaya remained awake, listening to the rain batter the roof, thinking about what tomorrow would bring. She had done everything she could today, yet the thought of the continuing storm filled her with unease. Sleep came only briefly, her dreams filled with images of frightened calves and collapsing shelters. When she woke the next morning, the rain had not stopped. Mud clung to her boots once again, and the air smelled of wet earth and damp wood. She stepped outside and surveyed the pens. Some of the calves were shivering, some cows had slipped and fallen, and the shelters were holding, but barely. Kaya felt a deep ache in her body and a gnawing worry in her heart. She knew she could not do this alone much longer, and yet as she stood in the rain, tending to her herd with steady hands and a determined spirit, Kaya reminded herself of the lessons she had learned from her ancestors: patience, resilience, and courage. She would not give up. She would find a way to protect her cattle, no matter how long the storm lasted. She would keep going, one fence, one calf, one step at a time, until the rain stopped and the land could breathe again. Hours later, as she repaired another broken gate, Kaya noticed movement in the distance, something or someone moving through the rain. She squinted, trying to make out the figure. It was too far away to see clearly, but it was unusual. Almost no one ventured out in this weather, especially on this rugged plateau. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be help? Or just another obstacle? She continued her work, glancing occasionally toward the distant figure. A part of her was wary. Trust did not come easily in these remote lands, but another part clung to hope. Perhaps this storm, which had seemed endless and merciless, might also bring an unexpected chance, a new path she had not yet imagined. Kaya returned to her cabin that evening exhausted, yet a small spark of curiosity burned in her heart. Who was out there? And could this person, whoever they were, be the help she so desperately needed? She did not know, but she knew one thing. Tomorrow, she would find out. And so, as the rain continued to fall, Kaya prepared herself for whatever might come. Determined to face it with the same courage and resilience that had carried her this far. She was alone for now, but the land was alive with possibility, and her story was far from over. The next morning, the rain had not stopped. Kaya wrapped herself tightly in her thick coat, pulled her boots on, and stepped outside. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of wet earth, and the gray sky pressed down like a blanket over the plateau. The cattle were restless, moving anxiously in the pens, their hooves sinking into the mud. Kaya's hands were already raw from tying down tarps and fixing broken boards, but she forced herself forward, determined to continue her work. As she moved along the edge of the pasture, her eyes caught the same figure she had glimpsed the previous evening. At first she thought her tired mind was playing tricks on her. But no, there it was again, slowly making its way across the wet field. Kaya's heart skipped a beat. The figure moved steadily even in the deep mud, and carried a large bundle over one shoulder. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and seemed entirely at ease in the pouring rain, a stark contrast to her own soaked and exhausted body. She squinted, trying to see his face, but the hood of his coat was pulled low. He did not call out or make any sudden movements. Instead, he simply approached at a steady pace, as if he had been walking this land for years and the storm meant nothing to him. Kaya's first instinct was caution. She had always been taught to be wary of strangers, especially in these remote lands where help was rare and danger could appear suddenly. Yet something about him, his calm confidence, the way he seemed completely at home in the rain, made her feel a flicker of hope. "Hello?" she called, raising her voice over the storm. The man stopped a few meters away, lowering his bundle to the ground. He pulled back his hood and revealed a face weathered by years in the mountains, with deep lines etched by sun and wind. His eyes were sharp, alert, but not unkind. "You need help," he said simply, his voice calm and steady. There was no question in his tone, no arrogance, just an observation of fact. Kaya hesitated. She had spent the past 2 days struggling alone, and the thought of accepting help was both relieving and intimidating. Pride whispered that she should manage on her own, that she had always done so. But her body was aching. Her hands were sore, and the storm showed no sign of ending. "Gee," she nodded slowly. I do," she admitted, her voice barely carrying over the rain. The man smiled faintly, then bent down and picked up his bundle again. "Then come with me," he said, turning toward the distant mountains. He did not wait for her answer, but his tone was patient, almost gentle, as if giving her the space to decide. Kaya stared at him, her mind racing. She knew every inch of her own land, every fence, every shelter, every path through the muddy pastures. Following a stranger into unknown territory was risky. But a deeper, more pressing thought pushed her forward. Her cattle were in danger, and she could not save them alone. Taking a deep breath, she nodded again and began to follow. The ground was slippery, and Kaya had to watch every step. The man moved with a fluid ease, navigating the mud as if it were solid ground. He occasionally glanced back, making sure she was keeping pace, and then continued without a word. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was quiet, filled with the sound of rain pounding the earth, the low murmur of the wind, and the occasional call of a distant bird. After some time, Kaya noticed that the terrain was changing. The flat plateau gradually gave way to rocky slopes, and the rainwater trickled in small streams down the side of the hills. The man led her along a narrow path, partially hidden by rocks and shrubs that seemed almost forgotten by anyone who had lived in the area. Kaya realized that she would never have found this place on her own. Finally, he stopped at the edge of a small valley. Kaya looked down and gasped. Nestled among the rocks and trees was a natural shelter unlike anything she had ever seen. Large rock formations created overhangs that protected from rain, and the ground beneath was dry and slightly elevated, perfect for the cattle. She could also see old wooden structures, partially hidden and long unused, that offered additional cover. It was a hidden sanctuary, a place the storm could not touch. This is amazing," she whispered, barely able to take it all in. "How did you know about this place?" The man shrugged, as if it were nothing. "I've lived in these mountains for a long time. You learn where the land keeps its secrets." His eyes met hers. "It's not much, but it will keep your herd safe." Kaya felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe without tension, without fear gnawing at the edges of her mind. She could already picture her cattle here, safe and dry, the mud and rain no longer a constant threat. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." "You don't have to," he replied simply. "We just need to get them here first." Kaya and the man worked together to guide the cattle from the muddy pens across the slippery slopes to the hidden valley. At first the animals were hesitant, their hooves sinking into mud, their muscles stiff from fear and exhaustion. Kaya's voice rang out, calm and steady as she coaxed them forward. The man moved alongside her, steadying a frightened calf here, blocking a stubborn cow there. He seemed to anticipate the animals' movements, guiding them with gentle nudges and firm, practiced hands. During a brief break, Kaya sat on a rock, catching her breath. She watched the man move among the cattle with ease and confidence. There was a quiet knowledge in the way he worked, a deep understanding of both animals and land. "You really know what you're doing," she said, admiration in her voice. He glanced at her, eyes softening slightly. "You're not so bad yourself," he said. "You've kept this herd alive in worse conditions than this." "You have courage. That counts for a lot." Kaya felt a flush of pride, though it was mixed with lingering worry. I don't want to lose them. They're everything I have." "I understand," he said quietly. "And you won't." "Not if we keep going." As the rain continued to fall, the two of them guided the last of the cattle into the valley. The animals huddled under the rock overhangs, calves pressed close to their mothers, and cows finally relaxed, stamping their hooves without slipping. Kaya walked among them, checking each one, brushing mud from their legs, and speaking in soothing tones. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. Once the herd was safe, Kaya turned to the man. "I don't even know your name," she said. He smiled faintly. "Call me Eli," he said. "Some people call me that. Some don't." "Kaya," she replied, offering her hand, which he shook briefly, his grip firm but not overbearing. For a moment they stood in silence, listening to the rain, watching the valley, and feeling the weight of the storm lift slightly from their shoulders. Kaya realized how much she had underestimated the possibility of help. The mountains were harsh, the weather relentless, but she was not alone. Not anymore. "You've done so much already," she said after a while, her voice thoughtful. "I can't imagine how long it would have taken me to get them here on my own, or if I even could have." "You would have found a way. You always do. But sometimes, knowing the land isn't enough. You need another pair of hands. That's all." They spent the rest of the afternoon reinforcing the makeshift shelters. Eli showed Kaya how to use fallen branches and rocks to strengthen the overhangs, how to channel water away from the dry spots, and how to create simple barriers that would keep the herd safe if the rain continued. Kaya listened closely, asking questions and absorbing every bit of knowledge. She realized she was learning more in these few hours than she could have in months on her own. By evening, the rain had eased into a steady drizzle. Kaya and Eli sat on a large rock, watching the cattle settle under the shelters. The air was fresh, smelling of wet earth and pine, and the valley felt like a hidden world, untouched by the storm above. Kaya felt a quiet gratitude she could not fully express in words. The herd was safe, her heart was lighter, and she had met someone who, for reasons she did not yet understand, seemed to care about more than just the animals. "You've done more than you know," she said finally, her voice soft. Eli nodded. "Sometimes the land shows you what it can offer. Sometimes people show you the same thing. You just have to be willing to accept it." Kaya looked at him, sensing there was truth in those words that went beyond the immediate moment. She realized that the mountains held lessons she had not yet learned, and that sometimes help came in forms she could not predict. As night fell, the rain stopped entirely. The valley lay quiet under the dark sky, the cattle safe and calm. Kaya felt a deep sense of relief and a small spark of hope for the first time in days. Tomorrow she would return to her cabin, to the rest of her land, but now she knew she was not truly alone. There were people, there were paths, and there were ways to face even the harshest storms, and in that quiet valley with the wind rustling through the rocks and the rain finally gone, Kaya realized that her story was beginning a new chapter, one filled with possibility, guidance, and perhaps... The morning after the storm brought a quiet calm to the hidden valley. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and the ground wet but manageable. Kaya woke before dawn, her body stiff from the previous day's labor, but her mind alert. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of relief. Her herd was safe, protected under the natural rock overhangs and the reinforced shelters she and Eli had built. She took a deep breath, savoring the fresh scent of wet earth and pine, and stepped outside. The valley was bathed in soft gray light, the mist curling around the rocks and trees like a gentle cloak. The cattle moved slowly, sniffing at the damp ground and settling in small groups under the shelters. Kaya smiled faintly, walking among them, checking their hooves, brushing mud from their legs, and speaking softly to calm them. It was quiet here, a stark contrast to the chaos of the storm the day before. Ellie appeared from the other side of the valley, carrying a small bundle of tools and supplies. "Morning," he said, his voice low but steady. "We have a lot to do today if we want to make this place truly safe for your herd." Kaya nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and determination. "I want to learn. Show me what to do," she said. Her voice carried a quiet confidence now, strengthened by the knowledge that she was no longer facing the challenges alone. Together they began inspecting the shelters. Eli demonstrated how to reinforce the overhangs with additional branches and stones, creating barriers that would keep the rain from splashing onto the dry ground. Kaya watched closely, asking questions and practicing the techniques herself. She realized that she had been so focused on survival during the storm that she had never learned some of the practical ways to protect her herd from extreme weather. Eli's guidance was patient and methodical, and she soaked up every instruction like a sponge. "See these rocks?" Eli said, pointing to a small pile near the base of the largest overhang. "If you stack them carefully, they will create a natural barrier. Water won't flow under the shelter, and your cattle will stay dry even if the rain returns." Kaya nodded, picking up stones and arranging them as he had shown. She could feel her confidence growing with each careful placement. The work was tiring, but there was a rhythm to it, a sense of purpose that made the hours pass quickly. As they worked, Eli shared stories about the land, explaining how the valley had been used in the past by travelers and herders. "The mountains always have their secrets," he said. "Some places are hidden for a reason. You learn to read the land, to understand where it can protect you and where it can be dangerous." Kaya listened intently, absorbing every detail. She realized that this knowledge was as valuable as any physical tool or shelter. Understanding the land meant she could anticipate problems before they arose, and she could care for her herd more effectively. By midday, they had finished reinforcing the shelters, but there was still work to be done. Some of the cattle were hesitant to move freely in the new space, uncertain of the boundaries and unfamiliar with the terrain. Kaya and Eli spent hours guiding them, using patience and gentle encouragement. Kaya discovered a new skill within herself, calming the animals not just with words, but with presence and understanding. She could feel their fear and respond to it, just as Eli had shown her. Around mid-afternoon, a sudden movement caught Kaya's eye. A young calf had slipped near the edge of a small stream that had formed from the rainwater. It struggled to regain its footing, teetering dangerously close to the flowing water. Kaya's heart raced, and without thinking she ran forward, her boots slipping in the mud. Eli was immediately at her side, steadying the calf with a firm hand while she guided it to safer ground. "That was close," he said, his voice calm but serious. "Even in a hidden place like this, danger can appear quickly. You have to stay alert, always." Kaya nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and renewed determination. She realized that the work was not just about building shelters or moving cattle. It was about understanding the unpredictable nature of the land and responding with skill and care. As the afternoon wore on, the rain returned in a light drizzle. But this time, Kaya was not afraid. She had learned from Eli, and she knew that the shelters would hold. She moved confidently among the cattle, adjusting tarps, checking for leaks, and ensuring that the animals were calm and safe. The work was hard, but it was no longer overwhelming. She felt capable, empowered, and connected to the land in a way she had never experienced before. During a brief break, Kaya sat on a rock, sipping water and watching the valley. Eli joined her, leaning against the same rock, and for a moment they simply observed the herd and the surrounding landscape. The silence was comfortable, filled with a shared understanding and respect for the land and its challenges. "You've done well," Eli said finally, breaking the quiet. "Most people would have given up after the first day of rain. You didn't. You kept going and you adapted. That's what matters." Kaya smiled faintly, feeling a warm sense of pride. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "You've taught me so much in such a short time." He shook his head. "You taught yourself. I just showed you a few tricks. The rest came from within you. You have the patience, the courage, and the determination. That's why your herd is safe today." Kaya felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for his help, but for the knowledge and confidence she had gained. She realized that this experience was changing her, teaching her skills that would last a lifetime. She was no longer just surviving. She was learning to thrive in a harsh and unpredictable environment. As evening approached, they continued their work, building small feeding stations and arranging the dry ground so that water would not pool in the areas where the cattle rested. Kaya discovered the satisfaction of creating order from chaos, of turning a dangerous situation into a safe and manageable environment. She felt a growing connection to the land, a sense of harmony that she had never known before. By nightfall, the valley was quiet once again. The cattle were calm, settled under the shelters, and the drizzle had stopped. Kaya and Eli sat on a large rock, watching the herd and listening to the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. The valley felt like a sanctuary, a place where the storm's chaos could not reach, and Kaya felt a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. "You've changed this place," Eli said quietly. "It's no longer just a hidden valley. It's a home for your herd, a place where they can thrive." Kaya nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She looked around at the shelters, the feeding stations, and the carefully arranged barriers, and she realized how much she had learned in just a single day. The valley was no longer just a refuge. It was a testament to her resilience, her determination, and the guidance she had received from Eli. As they prepared to rest for the night, Kaya reflected on the events of the past 2 days. She had faced fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty, yet she had persevered. She had learned new skills, gained valuable knowledge, and formed a bond with someone who had appeared at the right moment to guide her. She felt stronger, more capable, and more connected to the land and her herd than ever before. Eli spoke again, his voice calm and steady. "Tomorrow, we can continue improving the shelters, and I can show you even more ways to keep your herd safe. You'll be able to manage this on your own eventually, but for now, we'll do it together." Kaya nodded, feeling a sense of anticipation for the days to come. She realized that this was not just about surviving the storm. It was about learning, growing, and becoming a guardian for her herd in a way she had never imagined. She felt a quiet determination, knowing that with knowledge, patience, and effort, she could face any challenge that came her way. As the night settled over the valley, Kaya and Eli prepared for sleep. The cattle were calm, the shelters were secure, and the rain had finally stopped. Kaya felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had found not only safety for her herd, but also a path forward for herself. She closed her eyes, thinking about the lessons she had learned, the bond she had formed with Eli, and the challenges that lay ahead. She felt ready, empowered, and hopeful. And in that quiet, hidden valley, Kaya realized that the storm had not been just a trial. It had been a teacher. It had pushed her to her limits, revealed her strengths, and introduced her to someone who could guide her through the challenges of the land. She knew that tomorrow and the days after would bring new tasks, new lessons, and new opportunities to grow. But she also knew that she was ready to face them, equipped with knowledge, courage, and a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in many days, Kaya allowed herself to rest completely, knowing that her herd was safe, her land was protected, and her journey was only beginning. The valley, once hidden and untamed, had become a place of learning, growth, and quiet triumph, a place where she could thrive, not just survive. The next morning, Kaya woke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the mist in the hidden valley. The rain had stopped entirely, and the air was fresh and crisp, carrying the earthy scent of wet soil and pine. For the first time in days, she felt a true sense of calm. Her herd was safe under the shelters she and Eli had reinforced, and the valley, once a chaotic challenge, now felt like a sanctuary. Kaya stretched her stiff muscles, feeling the fatigue of the past days, but also a quiet satisfaction. Eli was already awake, tending to the cattle near the far side of the valley. He had arranged hay in the feeding areas and was checking for any wet spots that could have formed overnight. Kaya watched him for a moment, noting his careful, deliberate movements. There was a rhythm to his work, a quiet expertise that came from years spent living in the mountains. And yet, she realized, she had begun to move with a similar rhythm. The valley had taught her lessons in patience, observation, and care, lessons she would carry forward long after this storm had passed. "Good morning," Eli called, glancing up and smiling faintly. His eyes were calm and steady, and Kaya felt a small warmth in her chest at the sight of him. "We have a big day ahead if we want to make this place fully secure." Kaya nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. "I'm ready," she said, pulling her boots tight and adjusting her coat. She moved to the nearest shelter, checking the cattle there, brushing off mud, and speaking softly to calm them. The animals responded to her presence now with trust, pressing closer and following her movements with ease. Together, they spent the morning reinforcing the smaller shelters, adjusting rocks, and clearing any water channels that had begun to form from overnight rainfall. Eli showed her how to create small drainage ditches that would keep water from pooling in the areas where the cattle rested. Kaya listened carefully, practicing each technique under his guidance, feeling a sense of pride in her growing skill. She realized that she was learning not just how to protect her herd, but how to read the land itself, to understand its dangers, its gifts, and its secrets. Around midday, a challenge appeared. One of the young calves had wandered too close to the edge of a small cliff, attracted by a patch of green grass. Kaya spotted it just in time, her heart leaping into her throat. Without hesitation, she ran, her boots slipping slightly in the damp soil, but she reached the calf before it could stumble further. Eli followed closely behind, gently guiding it back to safer ground. "That was too close," he said quietly, once the calf was safe. "Even in a place like this, danger can come suddenly. You have to stay alert." Kaya nodded, her pulse still racing, but she felt stronger than she had a few days ago. The danger had tested her, but she had responded with courage and quick thinking. She realized that she had grown in ways she had never expected, stronger, wiser, and more capable of handling the unpredictable challenges of the land. After the scare, they took a break, sitting on a large flat rock and drinking water. Kaya watched the herd, now calm and settled, and felt a sense of deep gratitude. Eli's presence had been invaluable, but she also recognized her own growth. She had learned to trust her instincts, to act decisively, and to care for her animals with both knowledge and heart. "You've changed this place completely," Eli said, breaking the silence. "It's no longer just a hidden valley. It's a safe home for your herd, a place where they can thrive." Kaya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "And I've changed too," she admitted. "I didn't know I could handle all of this on my own. But now I feel stronger, capable. I feel like I understand the land in a way I never did before." Eli nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "You had it in you all along. You just needed the chance to see it for yourself." The afternoon passed with small tasks, rearranging feeding areas, clearing mud from the pathways, and checking every shelter for weak points. Kaya found a quiet joy in the work, a sense of harmony with the land and her herd. The valley no longer seemed wild or intimidating. It felt like a partner, offering its protection and resources to those who respected it and worked with it. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the valley, Kaya and Eli stood together on a rock overlooking the herd. The animals moved calmly under the shelters, calves pressing close to their mothers, cows grazing in the dry patches, and all seemed at peace. Kaya felt a deep sense of accomplishment, a quiet triumph that came from patience, effort, and learning. "I can't thank you enough," Kaya said softly, turning to Eli. "You appeared at the right moment, and you've taught me so much. I feel like I can handle anything now." Eli shook his head. "You already could. I just helped you see it. You have the courage, the patience, and the determination. That's what matters. The rest comes from within you." Kaya felt a surge of gratitude, not just for his guidance, but for the lessons she had learned about resilience, trust, and growth. She realized that the valley and the storm had been a teacher, and Eli had been a guide. But ultimately, she had faced the challenges, made the decisions, and cared for her herd. The pride she felt was not just for the work done, but for the person she had become in the process. As evening fell, the sky cleared, revealing a blanket of stars. The valley was quiet, except for the soft murmur of the stream and the occasional call of a distant bird. Kaya and Eli sat together, watching the herd, the shelters, and the peaceful landscape around them. It was a moment of calm, reflection, and connection, both to the land and to the experience that had changed her life. Eli spoke again, his voice calm and steady. "Tomorrow, you can continue to make improvements on your own if you wish. You have the knowledge, the skills, and the confidence. But remember, it's okay to ask for help if you need it. Even the strongest people do sometimes." Kaya nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She realized that independence did not mean facing challenges alone. It meant knowing how to act, how to adapt, and when to accept guidance. She had learned to trust herself, but she had also learned the value of connection and cooperation. Night deepened over the valley, and Kaya prepared to rest. She walked among the cattle one last time, speaking softly, checking each one for signs of discomfort, and ensuring that every animal was safe and calm. The shelters held firm, the feeding areas were organized, and the land itself seemed to embrace the herd, offering protection, stability, and quiet reassurance. As she settled onto a rock near Eli, Kaya reflected on the journey of the past days. The storm had been harsh, relentless, and overwhelming, but it had revealed strengths she did not know she had. It had introduced her to a guide who had helped her see her own courage and skill, and it had transformed the valley from a dangerous, uncertain place into a sanctuary where she and her herd could thrive. Eli looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "You've done more than you realize. This valley, these shelters, your herd, they are a reflection of your strength, determination, and heart. Never forget that." Kaya smiled, feeling a quiet, deep gratitude. "I won't, and I'll make sure my herd stays safe no matter what comes next. I've learned how, and I'm ready." They sat together as the stars glittered above, the valley calm and serene. Kaya felt a sense of closure and accomplishment, knowing that the challenges had been met and overcome. Her herd was safe, her land was secure, and she had grown into a stronger, wiser, and more confident caretaker. As the night deepened, Eli stood, stretching and preparing to leave. "I should get back to the higher mountains," he said. "You'll be fine from here. Remember what you've learned, and trust yourself." Kaya nodded, feeling a pang of gratitude and sadness at the thought of him leaving. "Thank you, Eli, for everything," she said softly. He gave a faint smile, then turned and walked back along the hidden path that had brought him to the valley. Kaya watched him disappear into the distance, feeling a mix of sadness, gratitude, and inspiration. He had been a guide, a teacher, and a friend, and his presence had left a lasting impact on her life. As the first light of dawn touched the valley the next morning, Kaya rose early, ready to continue caring for her herd. She moved among the cattle, checking their hooves, adjusting the shelters, and ensuring that everything was in order. She felt a sense of confidence and calm, knowing that she could handle whatever challenges came next. The valley, once wild and uncertain, had become a place of learning, growth, and peace. Kaya felt a deep connection to the land, her herd, and the lessons she had learned. She realized that the storm, the hidden valley, and Eli's guidance had all been part of a journey that had strengthened her, prepared her, and given her a new perspective on life, resilience, and trust. Kaya smiled as she looked over her herd, now calm and secure. She knew that storms might come again, that challenges would never fully disappear, but she also knew that she had the knowledge, the skill, and the courage to face them. The valley was her sanctuary, her herd was safe, and she was ready for whatever the future might hold. For the first time in many days, Kaya felt a profound sense of peace. She had faced the storm, learned from it, and emerged stronger. The Hidden Valley was no longer just a place on the map. It was a symbol of resilience, growth, and the quiet triumph of determination and courage. And so, as the sun rose over the mountains and the valley glowed in its light, Kaya knew that her journey was far from over. But she was ready, empowered, and filled with hope. She would care for her herd, protect her land, and carry the lessons of the valley with her, no matter what storms lay ahead.